This week on A Business Brief, a look at how the use of artificial intelligence in political campaign advertisements could shape the future of Missouri's elections. Then, the economic impact seen in St. Louis from hosting the U.S. Figure Skating Championships earlier this year. Welcome to Business Brief, Missouri Business Alert's podcast focused on the business news and issues shaping the state. My name is Trevor Grandin, and I am joined by my co-host, Sam Jackson. Sam, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing pretty well, but Missouri's muggy weather is just sticking around a little too long for me.
Well, we'll be thinking very cool thoughts as we jump into these headlines.
Affordable Care Act marketplace enrollment decreased sharply year over year in Missouri. Between February 2025 and February 2026, Missouri saw a 25% drop in marketplace enrollment. The ACA marketplace provides coverage options for people who don't have health insurance through the government or their employer. Missouri's drop is more than twice the 12% national average decline. This comes after tax credits that once helped low-income households pay for coverage expired earlier this year. The extension of these subsidies were at the heart of the government shutdown last year that lasted close to a month and a half. As a result, some Missourians are seeing their premiums increase by hundreds of dollars.
The housing industry saw a sharp drop in construction starts nationwide in May. That's compared to both the previous month and the same period a year earlier. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, privately owned housing starts nationwide fell 15.4% in May compared to April. They fell 8.7% compared to the previous May. Despite drops across the country, the Midwest was resilient. Housing starts rose 3.7% from April and 5.9% from a year ago in the region. Construction companies in the Midwest reported a positive start for new homes at the beginning of the year, followed by a sharp drop-off in the spring. They cited high costs and interest rates as a major barrier to selling new homes.
A decade after the Rams left for Los Angeles, the city of St. Louis is set to spend the money it won in a settlement after the team's departure. The $255 million will be directed towards North St. Louis development, the downtown area, and infrastructure. Part of the fund will go toward relief efforts in North St. Louis after a tornado touched down during a May 2025 storm. It cost $1.6 billion in damages and also affected parts of the Central Corridor. The settlement originally came from a lawsuit filed in 2017 by a St. Louis interest against the team and its owner. It alleged many officials with the National Football League and the Rams knew the team planned to relocate earlier than it was first disclosed, but lied about it.
Missouri cannabis workers are trying to turn recent union victories into a larger movement across the state. Dispensary workers at Columbia's high-profile cannabis unanimously ratified what union officials say is the state's first collective bargaining contract for cannabis workers. Through the contract, they secured higher pay and paid vacation time. In St. Louis, post-harvest workers at Proper Brands also won their election to unionize in early July. Cannabis workers at other organizations are scheduled to hold elections soon. This comes after the National Labor Relations Board rejected a St. Louis marijuana company's argument that post-harvest employees are agricultural workers. That would have meant workers were excluded from federal laws protecting most private sector employees' right to unionize without fear of retaliation.
Minutes released by the Federal Reserve this week paint a picture of a split rate-setting committee that doesn't agree over the future of inflation. In the first set of minutes released under new Fed Chair Kevin Warsh, some committee members thought that their rate would be unchanged or slightly lowered by the end of the year, but others said that it would likely be higher. After the meeting on June 17th, forecasts showed that half of the 18 policymakers who submitted projections supported lifting rates by the end of this year, while the other half supported keeping them unchanged or reducing them. Warsh emphasized after the June 17th meeting that the Fed will return inflation to its 2% target, which many economists took as evidence of increased rate hikes later this year.
Utility increases are one step closer to reality after Columbia's Water and Light Advisory Board voted in favor of the rate hikes. The increases include raising the water rate by 10% and electricity rates by 6%. City utilities officials argue the increases are necessary to maintain the city's aging infrastructure and keep pace with rising costs. Opponents of the proposal say utility increases will hurt poor people the most. This comes as communities across the state search for solutions to a growing energy demand from AI data centers, and Missouri's government explores the possibility of a nuclear future. Missouri's election season is heating up, and where there's an important race, there is advertising money being spent. Sam, have you seen any eye-catching ads this season?
Not since the Super Bowl. Do those ads actually work?
Well, the jury is still out on that, but one amendment on the ballot this August has been the catalyst for millions of dollars in ad spending. Amendment 5 was one of Governor Mike Kehoe's biggest initiatives this legislative session, and if passed, would phase out the state income tax in favor of a higher sales tax. It's led to ads like this.
They're lying about Amendment 5, calling in a tax hike. That's mule poop. Under Amendment...
Was that mule talking?
It was. This is one of the many ads circulating that uses generative artificial intelligence in its messaging. I was interested to know how AI might influence the future of campaign advertising, so I sat down with Professor Ben Warner, director of the Political Communication Institute at the University of Missouri, to chat about it. Here's part of that conversation. Well, Dr. Warner, thank you so much for sitting down with me. What does AI use in a ballot initiative, in a campaign, afford that maybe traditional advertising doesn't?
AI should make it faster and easier to generate a relatively compelling product. And so that would be on the script writing side, on the message design side, and on the production side. If you have a professional firm, you would say, okay, we have highly talented people who can, I would assume, write better ad copy than AI. And so maybe the question that campaigns will face is, do we hire a high quality firm to produce a really professional ad, or do we try to do something in-house with AI that maybe instead of is an A plus, maybe it's a B minus, but it costs considerably less. So that's one element of it, is in the design and production. Then the other thing that AI makes possible is things that look real but aren't real. Like if you're giving a speech and you say, well, I'm not worried about the cost of living, and then you follow it up with, I'm worried about, and you say a bunch of really reasonable things, and it's like, oh, well, they're just going to clip that first sentence where you said, I'm not worried about the cost of living, and they're going to run it over and over and over again. And so you had to be really careful about what you wanted to say. With AI, we can make it look like you said that even if you never said that. And so there is an opportunity for deep fakes to manipulate what it looks like somebody says.
Is this just an old issue that is kind of put on steroids because of AI, or is this truly something completely new in campaign advertising?
The broader question, I think it's a very old issue. And to me, the issue is fundamentally about, if you're a campaign and you're being outspent in ads, you're getting a bunch of money dumped on you, you're going to freak out and you're going to think, we need a bunch of money. We need to combat this. And it creates an arms race in fundraising that really puts money at the center of campaigning. And I think that's a very old issue. And I don't see AI intervening dramatically in that. But there is also the issue of campaign ethics. And I would be surprised if we see a lot of ads on Sunday Night Football that are deceptive, that AI enabled. I don't expect in the election for a bunch of senators to use AI to make it look like their opponent said something they didn't, and then try to run that on primetime television. I do think that AI creates the opportunity for a lot of misinformation to circulate more informally through email, through WhatsApp, TikTok, Instagram, people just text messaging each other or DMing each other videos that's like, how can you believe Susan Collins said this? And it's an absolute deep fake. She never said anything of the sort. Part of the trouble is that's not going to be on the airwaves. It's not going to be on Sunday Night Football. It's going to be in people's phones.
What does the future of AI in campaign advertising look like?
One of the things I worry about is, first of all, people being cynical and just saying everything's AI, or I can't believe my eyes. If I see my senator say something in video and it's outrageous, I'm going to say that's just AI, even if it's a real video. And you have to say, like, no, this is a real video. Like, are we going to see ads now where they say this is a real video? It's not AI. You can look it up, to try to drive home. Or are we going to see a candidate who gets caught in kind of one of those hot mic moments where they got recorded saying something they didn't intend to say? Are they going to say that's AI? I never said that. Is that going to be like another way for candidates to deny doing something that they wish they hadn't done?
On Tuesday, it was announced that Synchronine, a modernized take on traditional synchronized skating, will be a sport in the 2030 Winter Olympics. I don't know about you, but I loved watching the figure skating events at this year's Olympics.
Oh, me too. Didn't St. Louis host the U.S. Figure Skating Championships this year?
It did, and a recent report revealed that the event resulted in a positive economic impact for the city. Reporter Karina Grahovskaya sat down with Tim Ryan, the Director of Communications and Events for the St. Louis Sports Commission, to learn more about the impact this event had on the city. Here's part of that conversation.
Tim, thank you for sitting down with me. According to the report, the city saw a total economic impact of $15.8 million from hosting the U.S. Figure Skating Championships, with a combined sales tax revenue of $944,000. It also resulted in roughly 25,000 hotel room nights, with 67% of attendees coming from outside the St. Louis region and stayed an average of 4.5 nights. Did this meet expectations that you had for the event?
They were right in line with what we sort of expected, and again, that's because we've hosted the event before, albeit it was 20 years prior, but we had a baseline to expect and sort of, then adjust for, 2026 dollars and economy and all that. I like to point out that this is, a $15.8 million economic impact during a time which is typically a very slow tourism period in St. Louis because it's early January, it's after the holidays, no one's traveling much at all. And if they are, it's probably to go someplace warm and escape the winter conditions of wherever they live.
Was there anything in the report that surprised you or stood out to you the most?
I don't think anything surprised me all that much. And the reason why is because we did a very similar economic impact study along with, visitor fan sentiments about St. Louis for the Frozen Four in April of 2025. So we had results from that I would say were maybe a little more surprising in a good way. And because we had that in the recent, history in the back of our minds, less than a year prior, we sort of anticipated that we were going to get some similar results with the figure skating championships. So I wouldn't say surprise, except for I'll give you one piece that I would say was a nice surprise. So we had close to 950 people that were surveyed, and all of them were fans that were inside the building at the event. So they were all there for the event. Now, whether they came from elsewhere or not, but so 56% of a pretty good sample size said they were attending their very first U.S. Figure Skating Championships, which I think meant a lot for us to see that our efforts to grow that exposure and get more people's eyeballs on the sport, paid off, and that made U.S. Figure Skating happy to see too.
It was also a big year for figure skating this year, especially with the Olympics about to start soon after the championship and all these rising figure skating stars competing. Do you think that media attention contributed to the economic impact?
Yes, I think we got very lucky. We knew that there would be a heightened attention on the figure skating championships because they're not called an Olympic trials, but they basically are when they occur in an Olympic year. And so knowing that they were going into the Olympics, a month after, and the skaters that represent Team USA were going to be selected in St. Louis, I think the stars aligned for us. And so that definitely contributed to the media numbers being impressive, the overall economic impact, and people who wanted, whether they were, locals or travelers, people wanted to be there to see greatness.
Thank you, Tim, for your time. I appreciate it.
So it's time for us to get into our words of the week. Sam, what is your word this week?
My word is fair.
Okay, so not as good as great, but not as bad as horrible.
Kind of. Earlier this month, State Auditor Scott Fitzpatrick released the results of an audit for former Governor Mike Parson's time in office. He served from June 2018 to January 2025. And Fitzpatrick's office found that the governor's office spent $375,000 flying him around on state aircrafts without keeping flight records showing why. Plus, for a third of those flights, auditors could not identify any state business purpose.
Wow. So where does the word fair come into play?
Well, Fitzpatrick's office gave Parson's office the rating of fair, the second lowest on the auditor's 4-point scale. The auditor faulted Parsons' administration for improper payments to top staff and records that vanished when he left office. He also cited nearly $500,000 in other agency expenses that were quietly shifted onto the governor's books. A written response from Parson was included with the report where he strongly disagreed with the findings. That's all I've got for this week. What's your word, Trevor?
My word is pedicab.
Like a rickshaw and a bike?
Exactly. Think a covered cab with an electric bike slapped on the front. They've been zipping around Kansas City during the World Cup, and they are there to stay. The business EZ Pedicabs was established in 2024, but expanded after winning $35,000 in a business competition. That allowed them to buy more bikes, hire more drivers, and get a bigger garage space.
And then the World Cup came to town. What perfect timing.
Right? The pedicabs have a 10 to 15 mile radius, and the electric bikes let drivers zip down bike lanes and streets to bypass traffic. Benton Stone, one of the drivers, said it's like joyriding for him. It's a chance to meet new people, introduce them to Kansas City, and practice his Spanish a little bit. With the streetcar expansion going online and thousands of international visitors making the trip to KC for the tournament, these pedicabs are one more form of transportation in the city's network.
I'll have to take a spin on one next time I'm in Kansas City.
So will I. For our closing thought, here's Ben Warner of the Political Communication Institute speaking about what questions people should ask themselves after seeing any type of political advertising.
I think you should really wonder, where did this come from? How do I know that it's verified? How do I vet this myself? I think people should just be mindful consumers of the information that they get.
Well, that is all for this week. The M33 Project provided the music for this episode. For my co-host, Sam Jackson, and editor Kelly DeRook, I'm Trevor Grandin. This has been The Business Brief. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.